firstly, I'd like to welcome you to HVG and to our presentations. And got a really good presentation looking at volunteering and looking at some of the strengths and some of the opportunities with volunteering. And that's going to be led by Sally Munday. She's over at Homestart, has had a wealth of experience with working with different heritage organisations over the many years that she's been with us. So I'd like to welcome Sally, and she's going to lead our presentation today. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. It's so amazing to have so many people in this workshop. It's fabulous to see you all. Just to let you know, sometimes my Zoom goes weird, so I might have to keep turning my camera off if it decides that it can't cope with all of it. But we've still got a presentation, so hopefully that should be fine. It's really lovely to see so many people on this call. I am going to be talking about some work that we've been doing at Homestart around transforming our volunteering. And so I'm going to start by telling you all a little bit about who I am, a little bit about Homestart, because obviously it's not in the heritage sector, so it's probably useful for you to know a bit more about who Homestart are. Then I'm going to do a bit of context setting, which you probably already know, but it's always worthwhile. And then I'll talk to you about what we did and our 5 themes of transformation. And then it's over to you. Not a huge amount. I know sometimes breakout rooms can be terrifying at these sort of things, but it won't be long. It's just a really quick discussion around some of the things that I've talked about and how it might refer to developing transformation at your organisation. And then we'll have a bit of time at the end for questions. Right. So I actually started my volunteering management journey right back when I left university and I went to work for Headstone Manor and Museum, which was called Harrow Museum then, obviously in Harrow in London. And I managed volunteering, and I also did like the informal learning. You know, when you're part of a small museum, you end up being sort of managing a lot of different things. And I realized that it was the volunteering that I loved the most. And I was really lucky then to get my next job at the Science Museum in London. And then got to work with some incredible volunteer managers across the Science Museum group, including Matt from the NRM up in York, and also incredible volunteer managers from across London. So I set up the Museums of Exhibition Road volunteering group. So Science Museum, Natural History Museum, and the V&A, we used to get together to talk about, you know, what we could do at Volunteers Week and things like that. And then I was also part of the London Heritage Volunteer Managers Group as well. And we worked really hard on awards and all sorts of things. So I did love working in the museums in London. But then I decided to go and have twins, which was slightly unexpected. That was about 10 years ago now. They're nearly 10. I can't believe it. And we moved out of London and we moved to a small town in Northamptonshire called Brackley. And they were just about to embark on a restoration project of their town hall. It's beautiful. If you're ever in Brackley, please drop in. And so I started working for them. So it was still heritage, still volunteering, because it was the big community project funded by what was then called the Heritage Lottery Fund. And we delivered 28 community projects that ran alongside the development of the town hall. Oh, that's great, Chris. Glad to hear it. Please do pop in. There's a lovely cafe now in there, so maybe we can get together and have a cup of tea. And then I carried on working for the council after the end of the restoration, and realised that I could manage like the venue, which because I was so in love with that building. But I did realise after a few years that I'd lost that volunteer management, which I wanted to get back into. Oh, Merv, yes, remember Katerina, we called it Merv because with everything that had a V in it always sounds a bit dodgy, so we thought, why not call ourselves Merv, the Museums of Exhibition Road Volunteering. So then I joined Homestart, which is a charity, and I'll tell you more about that next. So I have made the leap from heritage to public sector, local government, and now I'm in the charity sector. It doesn't no way mean that I'm a complete expert on volunteering, but I do feel like all of those experiences have given me a slightly wider, maybe a bit more unique perspective on volunteer management, although I haven't worked in heritage sector for a while. Although I'm still very passionate about it, as you can tell, because I'm still obsessed with the town hall, which I helped to restore. So that's a little bit more about me. I remember coming to the first ever heritage volunteer group conference in Cardiff, and it was all, I was so happy that Matt and the group had worked so hard at getting HVG off the ground. So I'm actually really honoured to be here today and leading a session. So I really hope that it will be really useful for everyone. Please just keep asking questions, putting comments in the chat, but there will be time at the end as well. So next is a video. Now this is a video about Homestart because I think it's the best way to explain who we are. It can be a bit of an emotional video. We're a charity, it's what we do, so please, you know, turn your cameras off, have a cup of tea if you find any of the themes difficult. But yeah, over to Ramesh Ranganathan to tell you a bit more about what Homestart does.
My bedroom is my mum's bedroom and my brother's bedroom too.
We don't have any books at home.
They said draw something from holiday, but I've never been on holiday.
When we came to Wales, I missed my friends from home.
Since Mummy died, Daddy's not happy. He doesn't have time to play with us.
I get into fights. People say I'm naughty. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just bad.
Because our early years set the foundation for life, through one-to-one support and lots of different groups for mums, dads and children, Homestart helps families deal with whatever comes along. Our volunteers are the real heart of Homestart, trained to offer help in any way they can.
Leah helped decorate my part of our room.
Toby brings books and we read them together.
In the park with Selena, we pretend we're on jungle holiday.
We practice our English with Jane, and it helps a lot at school.
Now that Daddy has his friend Odin, he's much more fun.
When Asha and Mommy say I'm a good kid, I feel like one.
A small change for a child makes a huge difference to the rest of their lives. If you're looking to make your contribution count, start at the beginning and help us. Help them when they need it most. Please visit our website today.
We love our Homestart volunteers.
There you go. So yeah, apologies for the little donation ask at the end, but we can't help it, being a charity. But I just thought that was such a good video to sort of describe the impact, the work that we do. Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, so we work with families so that no child is left behind and everybody, you know, childhood can't wait is what we say. But it's also about supporting parents, and people come to Homestart for all sorts of reasons. It could be that you've had twins. I had a Homestart volunteer. It could be that you've just moved to an area and you don't have that family around you to support you when you've got young children. You can't remember which way's up, because parenting is a challenge. It could be, you know, it can be for a wide variety of issues: postnatal depression, domestic abuse. We have all sorts of people come in, and you can self-refer, or you can be referred by social services, health visitors, GPs, people like that. And we have 180 Homestarts across the country, so we're pretty much covered across the whole country. And as you can tell by that video, volunteers really are the heart of what we do at Homestart. The whole point of our support is that it's somebody who wants to be there. They're a volunteer, they've chosen to come into your home. They're not a social worker, they're not a health visitor, they're not a GP. They're there because they want to support you, and they're doing it voluntarily. But as you know, and this is where we get into the context setting, NCVO's Time Well Spent report has told us that, you know, the good news is that motivations on the whole for volunteers are stable. And if you put this into our context at Homestart, these things are really good. You know, people want to make a difference, they want to help people. The cause or the group is really important, and feeling that need in their community. So from that point of view, we're really lucky. You know, we've got those people that have never volunteered before. The reason they do want to volunteer is for these reasons. So that's great. And I'm sure you can think from your point of view, where you might fit into that list, where your organisation is finding volunteers come from. The problem, perhaps, is that the same report tells us that volunteers want to volunteer in a slightly different way. You know, they're looking for more flexible roles, more remote roles, which is really interesting and really important. But obviously, how do we match the two? How do we match people coming in with those motivations, which are great, with what they need from us, in terms of how we can support their volunteering journey? So this is just a little bit about what we've done at Homestart, and we will relate it back to your organisations later. So we've started what we've called our communities of volunteering approach. So we support families so that no parent feels alone. And as you've heard, we have a tried and tested role that works, which is this home visiting. So a volunteer comes, they get fully trained. It's like a 10-week training course. And they then start volunteering in people's homes. So they go once a week. But obviously it doesn't offer much flexibility, and the people that we're supporting, you need to be there every Tuesday morning if you've said you're going to be there every Tuesday morning. And often we found, so I work for Homestart UK, which is like the central body that helps to look after all those 180 Homestarts across the country. And we found often that if a volunteer comes to them and says, I really, really feel a connection with your cause, but I just can't commit to the training course at the moment, or I can't go into somebody's house every week, then often they're just left waiting or left out completely, because, you know, our Homestarts are delivering frontline services. They're really busy. They're trying to keep up with the demand because, you know, as there's less and less investment in our services, then Homestart are actually picking up a lot more complex families than we ever used to. So it means that often our Homestarts are like, oh, I'm really sorry, thank you so much, but we can't take you, which obviously when we're in this sort of volunteer recruitment crisis is not ideal. And all of our Homestarts are telling us we need volunteers, we need more recruitment. How do we keep hold of them? And I'm sure, I mean, not all of them, some of them are doing okay. And I'm sure a lot of you recognise that, you know, need for more volunteers. So we've basically realised that what we need to do is we need to build a community of volunteering around every Homestart, and they're not just home visitors. We will never lose that. It's the key. You know, we've been around for 50 years and that's what we deliver, but there's no way we're going to stop delivering that. But if we don't widen our support for volunteers, then we're going to lose our support for families, and that's obviously the end goal here. So what we always say is if you can get Homestart in their head, then they're stuck for life, basically. If you can get them joined onto a newsletter or something, and then they keep hearing about you every 3 months, and they keep thinking about Homestart, likelihood is that they'll then come along to an event, or they'll sign up for a prep course, our training course, when they're ready, or even they'll refer a friend. You know, that's also a useful tool. We'd love for people to feel like comfortable to come into Homestart when they need us. So that was what we thought, but we were like, how do we do this? So this is our model, community of volunteering model, and there is a lot of information here that I could go into. I could probably do a workshop on each one of these headings, but I'll try not to do that. So over the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to go through each of these headings and tell you a little bit about what it means for us. Please keep in mind how it might relate to you, because after this we're gonna sort of chat about it together. So I think you have to start with the top left, the pink box, volunteer informed or volunteer centered, and that really is the biggest shift. And it shouldn't be, and I know that sounds ridiculous, and I'm not being rude to our incredible 180 Homestarts, but they're so busy and so, you know, they're just so good at what they do that changes in how we approach volunteering seems quite scary. So putting the volunteer at the heart of that journey is a big shift from, you know, from sort of, we're so used to having this steady stream of retired grannies coming in and becoming our volunteers, and we love them for it. But they're changing, and, you know, a lot of those grannies are now caring for their children and their parents. And we know that since the pandemic, actually numbers of volunteers like that have gone down as they decide to focus on their family instead of volunteering. So it's things like changing the way we do our application forms. So it's one of the first things we did when we started looking at transforming our volunteering. So we realized that our application form was really long. And there's just no reason to ask for somebody's GCSEs when they first come to you. So we got rid of it, and now it's very short. It's just details, basically contact details and why you're interested. So you get a bit of a glimpse into that motivation, like why they're interested in volunteering for you. And then we back that up with quite a detailed telephone or email structure. So then the volunteer manager would call them up and say, oh, thank you so much. I see that you're really interested because you had twins back in the day and now you love Home Start. I would love to know a bit more about you. And then they go through this sort of form so that that volunteer manager is getting all that information, but it's not become a barrier for that volunteer by having to fill in this huge form. They think, do you know what, I can't ever do this. I'm not going to do it. So the volunteer manager helps to manage that. And it also means that the volunteer manager gets to know them quite quickly and can sort of start thinking about if there's other ways to get them involved, other than just putting them straight onto a prep course. It might be actually that they're ready for a prep course and that's the reason they've called, but you just never know. And so giving that slightly different approach to that initial inquiry has really helped putting volunteers right at the heart of it. There's more to it than that, and I'm sure I'll cover it in some of them, but I always think that's a really good example of one thing that we changed, a really practical thing, and it just helped put volunteering at the heart of those decisions. And we did have people that were worried about it, you know, but we have to ask about criminal checks. They're expected to work with children, and we're saying, oh, absolutely, we are not losing any of our safeguarding, you know, central thoughts or ideology, but we have to try and make it easier to get through the door. Once they're through the door, of course, we will do all our usual vetting, make sure they're appropriate, make sure they're ready. And if not, that doesn't also mean that's the end. And that's been the biggest other shift, is saying, well, if that volunteer can't be a home visitor, what else can they do? Well, how else can we keep them engaged? And maybe that's just a newsletter. Maybe it's coming along to events. Maybe it's doing social media, you know, thinking wider than beyond the home visitor. So the next one on our list is value of volunteering. It's like meeting the parents before the first date. Exactly. I'm loving your points, Chris, as they're popping up in the chat. Thank you. So value of volunteering, and now we all know this, funders and people who are interested in volunteering who aren't in volunteering know that all they often want to hear about is their monetary equivalents, which is a very, very useful tool. And we know that, you know, if we can prove to somebody that you know, we've got £500,000 worth of volunteer time, like what a big tick. It looks fabulous. And I don't think we'll ever lose that. Obviously at Home Start, it isn't actually, you know, if we could pay our volunteers, we wouldn't. The whole point is that they're volunteers. Paid people in your home feels very different to a family than somebody who's come there voluntarily. So even if we had all the money in the world and we could provide 10,000 paid family support officers, we wouldn't. The whole point is that we're doing it voluntarily. So we've got to find other ways of demonstrating that value. And so we have done that. We've done a little bit of work looking at sort of social value. We've commissioned reports within our network around the motivations and well-being and the effects on volunteers themselves. You know, we get so, in the charity sector especially, you get so good at telling the stories of the families, the people we impact. But actually we've started telling the stories of the volunteers, you know, somebody who's come in, they were a supported parent, and now 10 years later, they're living independently, they're doing really well, their children are thriving, and now they've got the time to give back. And they've also gained skills while volunteering, and now they're working as a social worker. Like, what a story to tell. And that's the value of volunteering. It's not just that that person's given us 4 years, 2 hours a week, you know, and therefore they've saved us X amount of money, because they haven't. The whole point is that they're there. So we do quite a lot of work around the value of a volunteering. There's somebody who's not on mute. I'm just wondering if everybody can make sure they're on mute. That would be ideal.
Yeah, I'm just going to mute everyone. And then,
okay. Thank you. So the next one is inclusion, equity and accessibility. And we did toy with having this one on its own or not, because realistically, obviously, it runs through all of them. but we decided in the end that it needed to be its own one, because actually it's that important, and it's actually a sort of practice in its own right. There we go. It's a practice in its own right to sort of think about how to remain more accessible, more inclusive, and it links with being volunteer informed and volunteer centred. So another example I'm going to give is one of our home starts in London had somebody approach them and they really wanted to volunteer for them. But they were an asylum seeker, so they, you know, we couldn't get all the right vetting, we couldn't get all the right forms and everything in place. It was a lot of work, and that home start worked really closely with Abdul to make sure that it wasn't going to affect any of the money that he was getting, his living arrangements, but he had so much to offer Home Start. It felt awful that they would turn him away. So actually what Abdul did is he came along and he did do the course. So he did the full 10-week course, knowing that he would never be able to support a family directly in their home because we couldn't get the right permissions. But what instead, he comes in once a week and he does all their social media because obviously he's supervised, he's got all the people around him that he needs, and he is doing so much. And actually, since he's volunteered for us, he won an award at our Home Start Awards, and he is now, he's been granted asylum and he's working, but he's still volunteering for Home Start. So, you know, actually in that moment, probably Home Start were doing more for Abdul than Abdul thought he was doing for us, but it wasn't. You know, he created incredible posters and social media. So remaining as accessible as possible was really important to Abdul, and has become really important to Home Start Greenwich, because it means that they've got this incredible asset in Abdul. And actually one day now he might be able to start volunteering in a family's home. So what an amazing story. We, you know, also changing our application process made everything a lot more accessible. It's all about removing barriers. You know, we've been around for 50 years. There's 180 home starts. There are a lot of traditional practice still happening in our network. And so we have to challenge that a lot. You know, originally it was, the whole premise was that it was parents supporting parents. And we've had to sort of challenge that recently. It's been quite a challenge for our network to really think about, well, if we're not, why would we do it? Why would we have somebody who's not a parent supporting you? So, you know, we're trying to say, well, let's think more inclusively and more accessibly. Actually, if somebody's been a teacher or a librarian, or they're an aunt, or they're just a really caring person, that doesn't mean they can't be a Home Start volunteer. And the magic of Home Start comes in the matching. So a Home Start member of staff will get to know the volunteers and get to know the families. And so they'll do that matching process. So obviously sometimes you think, you know, this person really needs somebody who has been a parent, because they need that sort of lived experience. But also sometimes the lived experience is nothing to do with being a parent. It's because they speak Spanish or something, like, you know, and that's the asset that volunteer needs in that moment. So we're trying to break down barriers, and it's slow going. But we don't have any home starts now that specify you have to be a parent, which is good progress. So the next one is around celebrating volunteers, and this sort of links to retention. We all know that volunteers sort of hate being celebrated on the whole, but we still try and encourage it, obviously, especially if we're thinking wider and we're looking at new audiences of volunteers. It might be that actually those volunteers do thrive on the reward and recognition a bit more than sort of our traditional idea of the volunteer that just does it for the love of it and doesn't need us to say thank you. So we do run annual awards. I just mentioned Abdul, who won a couple of years ago, but it's more than awards. You know, we try and think about those little moments. So we always say that it's a little moment can change a life, and sometimes, you know, it's those little volunteering moments that do the same. So we try and recognise those and encourage our home starts to recognise those. Obviously we do Volunteers Week, and also things like this is me celebrating our volunteers. I hope that you will go away and think about Home Start volunteering. Maybe you want to join up, maybe you just want to refer somebody in, or just find out where your local Home Start is. It's all about celebrating the incredible things that volunteers do every single day in people's homes for Home Start, and in other organisations. You know, there's loads, isn't there? And we can't stop celebrating. But it's not always just about recognising volunteers directly. It might be on a wider scale, which is what I see my role is at a sort of head office level. And the last one is being bold. again, or arguably any one of these could have come first. It's really hard to order them. But transformation is inherently risky, I would say, in a good way. You have to sort of balance up what's worth it and what's not, and also knowing the challenges are coming. Like I've said, like asking everybody to change their application process. A lot of people are like, oh, for goodness sake, we've just got used to the old form, you know, why are we having to do this? And I remember when I was at the Science Museum, you know, talking to all the volunteer supervisors in the different departments when we were trying to change something. It's like, go guys, but you know, we're trying to, the ultimate goal is to support more volunteers in, to support more families. And if we have to be bold, like completely scrapping asking about GCSEs the first time we speak to somebody, then maybe that's just the decision we have to go for. Maybe we need to, maybe the answer is that we completely change our volunteer roles. That's not what we decided to do, but being bold is thinking about it and then maybe coming back from the ledge. I was in a meeting the other day with my CEO and he was like, do we just need to completely change the way we think about, do we need to have like volunteer managers regionally? What do we need? What could we do? Like, what is big ideas and coming back down? And so, yeah, I think it can be so easy to forget that to be bold and to try things and be exciting in what you do. In fact, we had some funding last year that was to be dispersed throughout our network, and I specifically said I want us to fund like scary challenges in our network. I want to fund failure. I want them to try and fail so that we learn from it, or try and succeed. So people were doing things like somebody wrote a module for their local English as a second language or English as an additional language college about parenting, just to see if it helped recruitment. And I don't think it did, but we've still got a Home Start module now in a random English college somewhere. We had somebody design back of the bus adverts, which we'd never done before. So sort of funding risks and just taking those risks was a massive deal. And it was quite hard to get the funder to agree, as you can imagine. But the learning from it was huge. And if one person tries it and it works and we can copy that 180 times, then we're making progress. So they are our 5 themes of volunteering, and as I said, I could carry on, but I won't. So next, I was wondering if what does that actually mean? Oh yes, that's right. So for us at Home Start, that means that no one size fits all. Each volunteer will need a different support approach, and that is hard work, and we recognise that. Especially when, you know, you've got a family who hasn't eaten in a week and they don't know how they're going to afford Christmas. You know, like we are working with the most scary, difficult challenges. And so when I say, oh, can you just make sure that you have like a 10-minute conversation with every volunteer? They're like, oh, Sally, you don't know what it's like. We can't cope with that. But we're trying to sort of prove why it's worth it. And it has worked so far. We're investing in volunteer leadership. So since I've been at Home Start, I've been there for 3 years. The volunteer team at Home Start UK has gone from 1 to 3, which in volunteer, I remember always when I was working in museums, I was the sole volunteer lead. And so I'm sure a lot of you recognise that. So just investing in that has been amazing. We have a volunteer coordinators group for the whole of our network, because often a Home Start will have a volunteer lead, obviously, within their Home Start. We are investing in training, which I think I'll talk about a bit later, but we are really trying to focus on that leadership level to really support better volunteering understanding. Buy-in at senior level, sometimes tough, I know. It's not as tough for me now, working in a charity where volunteering is literally what we do. As I said, I'm meeting with the CEO and our SLT senior leadership team quite regularly, but I do remember it feeling slightly harder when I was working in a museum. But I think, again, if you go through those steps and really prove your value, celebrate, then there's always a way to keep doing that. But do keep pushing for more buy-in if you can. Data. I love a good bit of data. And if you can, again, prove how incredibly impactful the work of your volunteers are, then you're more likely to be able to get more funding, more buy-in, more investment. You know, it all helps. So that's what we've been trying to do as well. We're now doing a quarterly data return from all our network on things on their volunteering. So we have, again, another tradition from our network is that if a volunteer can't carry on home visiting for a while, then they just get called resting, and it's like they just get put to the side. And if you're resting for more than a year, then you have to do the full course again. So I'm now working, it turned out we have 1,000 resting volunteers at the moment, and I just thought, they're not resting. They're still volunteers, they're still ambassadors, they're still championing our work, they're still coming along to events, they're still talking about Homestart every possible opportunity. So we're now doing a piece of work called Reframing Resting to help support our network to understand how better to use those volunteers rather than just sort of chuck them to the side and wait for them to come back. Yeah, supporter journeys. More roles, more volunteering, widening what we mean. So community champions, maybe train up your local corporate partnership, you know, your local business to understand what Homestart does so that they can refer people in. The more people that get Homestart in their head, the more people are volunteering within your community around your Homestart. And learning and knowledge, yeah, investing in better learning. We've just developed a brand new learning management system that has all of our central courses on there. We've got a partnership with John Lewis at the moment, and they funded a lot of courses around play, finance, sleep, and healthy eating. And so all of our volunteers get access to all these like enrichment courses, as well as your basic standard what you have to learn about to be a volunteer. We've got all these extra things, so those people that are coming along to volunteer because their motivation is to learn more, we've got really fabulous quality training for volunteers online. And yeah, to get Homestart in their heads, which is always good. Right, I'm going to ask you now to take your phones out and scan, if you want to, you don't have to, but it would be lovely to hear your response. Scan this code and it should take you to a Slido poll. And then if you can answer what is the most important theme for volunteer transformation for you. So you just have to pick, you don't have to think. Just think about those 5 themes that I went through. It's going to disappear for a sec, but it will reappear. So you can slide it, there you go. So these are the results coming in live. That's really interesting about value. I think it's often the one that's forgotten. I think people are like, yeah, we're looking after our volunteers. We know how many hours they do. We know what's the equivalence. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that thinking about that and accessibility. Oh, this is great. Thank you. This is really lovely to hear all of your thoughts. Fab. Right. So I'll leave that open and I'll share it with you at the end where we got to. But just for now, so I just wonder, we are going to put you into breakout rooms. What's the time now? Oh yeah, fine. If you could, in breakout rooms, if you could have if you could just pick one theme between you, it doesn't matter if you all double up and you pick the same one, discuss how this theme relates to your work, and maybe just try and think of at least one strategic idea and one operational idea around your theme. So sort of transformational triggers, and they can be big or small. They can be changing an application form. They could be completely overhauling the way you volunteer. They could be thinking about new funding priorities. So we are at 10:39 and we're going to finish about 5:02. So I reckon if you have 10 minutes now in a breakout room, we'll come back and we'll have 5 minutes to sort of have a chat about it. So, yeah, there we go. Right, lovely to have everyone back. I really had some, thanks Alex, had some lovely conversations. So I just wondered, I'm not going to like put anyone on the spot, but I just wondered if anybody would like to share 1 or 2 of their ideas or thoughts that they'd had during their session. You can put it in the chat, you can come off mute, put your hand up, whatever way is best for you, but I'd love to hear some of your ideas if anybody's got one. Oh yeah, over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, just very quickly, I mean, quite a few of our group resonated with that application thing. Do we make it complicated? I mean, we've looked at how we can strip it out, and then maybe look at a second application once they've gone through the process. Depends on what systems and things you're using, but that really resonated with us about that need to be flexible.
That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah, sometimes you think, oh, it can't be that hard, but actually you forget. I think we get so used to our systems that sometimes you forget to check the things that are the most obvious. Thanks, Michelle. Chris?
Yeah, so our group also talked about that pillar as well. So Wendy was chatting about a really impressive thing that her organisation has done and created her own volunteer management system, really bespoke to her organisation. So uh, to make sure the application process really suits their volunteers. So I was kind of saying that's also being very bold as well. So that I thought that was really great. And then just kind of saying it at Chester Zoo, we make sure hopefully that we're really volunteer informed. So we try and have volunteers at most levels of decision making when it's to do with like the volunteer program. So we invite them to kind of team meetings and anything to do with the volunteer program really. So
yeah, that's a really good one. I know that Scouts often have volunteers on their interview panels for people coming to work for Scouts head office, which I think is a great idea. Yeah, having volunteers represented at every level is a great one. Thanks, Chris. Dara?
Hello. We were actually talking about the same pillar because I have the same challenge with application forms and onboarding processes. So, but we also looked at the volunteering roles that we're currently offering, but instead flipping that around and looking at what people actually want from us.
Yes.
So I'm at RAF Museum, so everybody wants to clean aircraft or conserve aircraft, but I very rarely have roles open in that sort of area. So I'm wondering if there's a way that I can take this the other way around. So I'm saying people want to do, you know, clearing aircraft or whatever the roles are, and then going back to leadership and sort of saying, this is what we need your buy-in for, is to support, you know, the managers to be able to actually, you know, staff to be able to actually give some time to bring these people on board, etc. So yeah, listening to what people actually want and then trying to get the buy-in from behind to actually do it.
Love that idea. Yeah, so using the data to get more buy-in, to get more roles, to get more volunteers, like it all makes sense. And yeah, a simple thing like asking people when they come in, and we've encouraged people to do that. We had somebody recently come and say, look, I love Homestart, I just can't commit to the course, I can't do 2 hours a week. And somebody said, okay, what would you like to do? And she said, well, I actually work in, I think she was working in legal services, and in the end she became a trustee. And so some trustees are a forgotten role, I think sometimes they are volunteers. And so, you know, she's now a trustee, and in a way it's just as much commitment as she would have done before, but it suited her skill set better. Just asking that question really helped, rather than saying, okay, well, if you can't do that, I'm really sorry, but you know, you can go on a waiting list. She's actually become a trustee, which was something else they really needed. So really like that idea, Dara, of putting it back out to people and saying, what would you like to do? And if it's not something you offer, then, you know, make that part of your sort of process or plan policy going forward. Fab. Some really lovely ideas. I really hope that this has been really, really useful and hopefully got some thoughts going. I know that I'm coming from the charity sector, but I do think there's a lot of crossover when it comes to volunteer management. If anybody has got any questions, we do have 5 more minutes. If anybody's got anything specific they want to know, I can see some things in the chat, but it's going too fast for me to see. Let me see. Oh yeah, so Alex has just put the Zoom links up, so thank you very much. I've just remembered that I've got another slide. So there's also the main room one there, but I've got my email address on there, and I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to hear any more.
Sally, I'd just like to emphasise the fact that I think it was really important that you mentioned that volunteers, sometimes the little moments actually, you know, can have the greatest impact, because I think sometimes we can forget that. We think that, you know, it's all about sort of the big projects and the big you know, activities, but it's actually sometimes it's the small mundane things and that's what the volunteers keep coming back, you know, for, and how they feel appreciated. So I think that was really nice just to, you know, to re-emphasize that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always worth remembering, you know, celebrating those long service awards, but also remembering sometimes people that come in and volunteer for 6 weeks can be just as important. So yeah, lovely. Thank you. Gemma, I can see you've got your hand up.
Sorry, you know when you used to Teams, and now I'm like, it's just taken me 5 minutes to work out how I put my hand up on Zoom. Sorry.
I absolutely agree. I can't remember what to do. Yeah.
And then I couldn't unmute myself. No, it was just in line with that. I'm trying to really encourage a shift at the King's Trust around not only recognising people who've been there for like 20 or 30 years, and trying to make it that actually I want people to call out when people celebrate sort of the little successes, because I'm also conscious that we have a lot of volunteers who, yes, they may have been a volunteer in name, and this might be controversial, but and of course they're supporting us as the trust, but they haven't actually actively donated any time or worked with a young person or supported them or supported any of our activities for a number of years. So I'm kind of like, well, yeah, you might be there in paper sort of more as a supporter in that role for the last 30 years, but actually we've had somebody who's been here in the last, for 6 months and have really actively supported a young person into getting their first job or attending their first interview. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to encourage our teams to kind of evidence, and for us to sing and shout around, rather than, please, can I just get well, it used to be the letter from Prince Charles, but now obviously it's a letter from the King, and kind of do it in another way, so that we're really celebrating those, the impact that volunteer has had on that specific young person, and trying to drive that.
So we've set up it's actually within our staff team, but we have suggested it for our Home Starts to do for volunteers, and it's called Home Stars. See what we did there. And we have I know, and we use our our organizational priority, like we prioritize kindness, we work together, and then we get people to nominate people under those headings. So it's not, you could be prioritizing kindness in a meeting, you could be prioritizing kindness in a 6-year project. So that's sometimes it's a good way. It's like altering the way that people can celebrate somebody or nominate somebody by putting different parameters in place. That's really helped. It's really worked for us. So yeah, thank you, really like that. Fab. Right, that's it, I think. Thank you so much.
That's a really nice way to end with that last comment, Gemma. And I really do appreciate Sally, for her time and presentation today. That's really good insights into transformative volunteering. So I've posted the links of the 3 other sessions. Take a break now for 15 minutes, and the rooms will open again in 15 minutes time at 11:15. So hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.